The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Rosenborg Palace, casting long shadows across the marble floors where Crown Prince Alexander stood, adjusting his navy uniform. Today would be different from all the carefully staged appearances that had come before. Today, he and Princess Helena would sit down with the kingdom's most trusted television journalist and speak openly about their marriage, their struggles, and their hopes for the future. Alexander had been reluctant at first. The royal family of Eldoria had always maintained a dignified silence about personal matters. His father, King Frederick, had ruled for 32 years without ever giving a single personal interview. The monarchy's strength, the king often said, came from mystery and distance. But times were changing, and Alexander knew that the people wanted to see their future rulers as real human beings, not distant figures waving from balcony railings. Helena emerged from her dressing room, wearing a soft blue dress that complemented her auburn hair. She looked nervous, her hands smoothing the fabric repeatedly. They had been married for 4 years now, and Alexander still found himself amazed by her natural grace. She had come from a noble family, but not one with royal blood. Their marriage had been arranged, as was tradition, but somewhere along the way, genuine affection had grown between them. The decision to do this interview had not been easy. 6 months earlier, their marriage had faced its most difficult period. Rumors had circulated in the press about Alexander's friendship with Lady Catherine Worthington, a childhood companion who had returned from studying abroad. The stories were largely untrue, but the damage to Helena's reputation and their relationship had been real. Helena had withdrawn from public appearances, spending weeks at the family's country estate, and Alexander had realized how much he truly cared for his wife only when he faced the possibility of losing her. Helena sat down at her vanity mirror, applying a final touch of lipstick. In the reflection, Alexander could see the determination in her eyes that had first attracted him to her. She had never been one to back down from challenges, even when palace advisors suggested she should remain silent and let the controversy fade naturally. Helena had insisted they address the rumors directly, honestly, and publicly. Their press secretary, James Morrison, knocked softly on the door. James had worked for the royal family for 15 years and had never suggested such a bold move before. But he had seen how the constant speculation was affecting both the prince and princess, and more importantly, how it was beginning to damage the monarchy's relationship with the people of Eldoria. The kingdom had been through difficult times recently. Economic challenges had led to unemployment in the industrial regions, and many citizens were questioning whether the monarchy was still relevant in modern times. Some neighboring countries had already transitioned to purely ceremonial monarchies, while others had abolished their royal families entirely. Alexander and Helena knew that their generation of royals would need to prove their worth in ways their predecessors never had to consider. Helena stood and took Alexander's hand. Her grip was firm, but he could feel the slight tremor that betrayed her nervousness. They had spent hours preparing for this interview with their communications team, discussing possible questions and rehearsing their responses. But they had also agreed that authenticity was more important than perfection. The people of Eldoria deserved to see them as they truly were, not as carefully crafted public personas. The television crew had been setting up in the Blue Salon since early morning. This room had been chosen specifically because it felt more intimate than the formal throne room, yet still unmistakably royal with its silk wallpaper and oil paintings of previous monarchs. The lighting had been adjusted multiple times to ensure both Alexander and Helena would appear warm and approachable on camera. Margaret Thornfield, the journalist conducting the interview, was known throughout Valdoria for her fair but thorough reporting. She had covered the royal family for 12 years and had earned their trust through her discretion and professionalism. Margaret understood that this interview could either strengthen the monarchy's connection with the people or potentially damage it irreparably if it went poorly. As they walked toward the salon, Helena squeezed Alexander's hand. They had talked late into the night about what they wanted to accomplish with this interview. Beyond addressing the rumors about Lady Catherine, they wanted to show the people of Valdoria that they were committed to serving the kingdom and to each other. They wanted to discuss their vision for modernizing the monarchy while preserving its traditions and values. Alexander had spent his entire life preparing to be king, but he had only recently begun to understand what that truly meant. His education had focused on history, diplomacy, and protocol, but no one had taught him how to balance public duty with private happiness, or how to maintain a marriage under constant scrutiny from the press and the public. Helena had faced even greater challenges. As a princess by marriage rather than birth, she had to learn not only how to navigate royal protocol, but also how to find her own role within the institution. She had chosen to focus on charitable work with disadvantaged children, but even these efforts were sometimes criticized by those who felt she was either doing too much or too little. The Blue Salon felt different with all the television equipment installed. Cameras, lights, and cables had transformed the elegant room into a temporary studio. Alexander and Helena took their seats on the antique sofa they had chosen for the interview, positioned to face Margaret's chair with the cameras capturing them for flattering angles. Margaret reviewed her notes one final time while the technical crew made their last adjustments. She had prepared questions that would allow the royal couple to address the recent controversies while also discussing their broader vision for the future of Valdoria. The interview would air in prime time the following evening, and early publicity had already generated enormous public interest. Alexander straightened his uniform jacket and glanced at Helena, who was checking her appearance in a small mirror provided by the makeup artist. Despite their nervousness, they both felt a sense of relief that they would finally have the opportunity to speak directly to their people without their words being filtered through newspaper reports or palace statements. The red light on the main camera illuminated, signaling that recording had begun. Margaret smiled warmly at the royal couple and introduced herself to the television audience before turning to address her first question to Crown Prince Alexander. The interview that would either strengthen or challenge the future of the Valdorian monarchy had officially begun. Helena reached over and took Alexander's hand as Margaret began to speak, a gesture that was both natural and symbolic. Whatever came next, they would face it together as partners in both marriage and in their service to the kingdom they would someday rule together. The morning light continued to stream through the windows as the cameras rolled, capturing what would become one of the most significant moments in the modern history of the Valdorian royal family. Outside the palace walls, the people of Valdoria went about their daily lives, unaware that their future king and queen were about to reveal themselves in ways no previous generation of royals had ever dared to attempt. This interview would mark the beginning of a new era of transparency for the monarchy, but it would also open the royal couple to new levels of scrutiny and criticism. As Margaret posed her first question about their marriage and recent challenges, Alexander and Helena prepared to share their truth with a kingdom that was eager to listen but not necessarily prepared to understand the complexities of royal life in the modern world. Margaret Thornfield leaned forward slightly, her expression both professional and compassionate as she addressed the royal couple. The first question came gently, asking about their daily lives and how they balanced their public duties with their private relationship. Alexander answered first, describing their morning routines and shared interests, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. Helena found herself relaxing as she spoke about their shared love of horseback riding and their quiet evenings spent reading together in the palace library. These simple details felt revolutionary to share publicly. Previous generations of royals had maintained such strict privacy that the people of Valdoria knew almost nothing about their personal lives beyond official ceremonies and state functions. The conversation gradually shifted to more challenging territory. Margaret asked about the pressures of royal life and how they had adapted to constant public attention. Helena spoke candidly about the difficulty of adjusting to life in the spotlight, admitting that there had been times when she had felt overwhelmed by the expectations placed upon her. Alexander watched his wife with growing admiration as she articulated feelings he had never heard her express so clearly before. Helena described the loneliness of royal life, explaining how the protocol and formality that surrounded them sometimes made it difficult to form genuine friendships outside their marriage. She spoke about missing the freedom to make spontaneous decisions or to go shopping without security arrangements and media attention. When Margaret broached the subject of the recent rumors about Lady Catherine Worthington, the atmosphere in the room grew tense. Alexander had anticipated this question, but actually hearing it spoken aloud made his chest tighten. Helena's hand remained in his, her grip steady and reassuring. Alexander addressed the rumors directly, explaining that Lady Catherine had been a childhood friend who had recently returned from studying art history in France. He acknowledged that they had met for lunch twice to catch up on old times, meetings that had been photographed by the press and taken out of context. His voice carried genuine emotion as he described how these innocent encounters had been transformed into a scandal that hurt both his wife and his marriage. Helena surprised everyone, including Alexander, by speaking next. She looked directly into the camera and addressed the women of Valdoria, acknowledging that many of them had probably faced similar situations in their own marriages. She spoke about the pain of seeing her husband's name linked romantically with another woman in newspaper headlines, but also about the importance of trust and communication in overcoming such challenges. The princess revealed that she and Alexander had attended counseling sessions with a palace chaplain to work through the difficult period their marriage had experienced. This admission sent shock waves through the room, as no royal couple had ever publicly acknowledged seeking help for marital problems. Helena explained that they had learned valuable lessons about communication and about not allowing outside pressures to damage their relationship. Alexander took over the narrative, describing how the experience had ultimately strengthened their marriage. He spoke about realizing how much Helena meant to him when he saw how much pain the rumors had caused her. His voice cracked slightly as he admitted that he had been naive about how his actions might be perceived and how they could hurt the person he cared about most. Margaret skillfully guided the conversation toward the couple's charitable work and their vision for modernizing the monarchy. Helena's eyes lit up as she discussed her visits to children's hospitals and her efforts to establish new programs for disadvantaged youth. She had been working quietly with child psychologists to develop better support systems for children in foster care, a project that had received little media attention until now. Alexander spoke passionately about his desire to make the monarchy more accessible and relevant to ordinary citizens. He described plans to open parts of the palace to public tours and to establish regular town hall meetings where citizens could bring their concerns directly to the royal family. These ideas had been controversial among the palace's traditional advisors, but Alexander felt strongly that the monarchy needed to evolve to survive. The interview revealed aspects of their personalities that the public had never seen before. Helena displayed a sharp intelligence and deep empathy as she discussed social issues, while Alexander showed a more relaxed and personable side than his usually formal public appearances suggested. They laughed together when Margaret asked about their different tastes in music, with Helena admitting her guilty pleasure for pop music, while Alexander defended his preference for classical compositions. As the conversation continued, both began to feel more comfortable. They shared an amusing story about getting lost during a hiking trip at their country estate, an adventure that had ended with them being found by their security team after dark, muddy, and laughing despite their exhaustion. These glimpses of normalcy made them seem more relatable to their subjects. Margaret asked about their plans for starting a family, a deeply personal topic that they had never discussed publicly before. Helena blushed slightly as she admitted they hoped to have children soon, explaining that they wanted to be young parents who could be actively involved in their children's lives. Alexander added that they intended to raise their future children with an understanding of both their royal responsibilities and their roles as ordinary human beings. The discussion turned to the future of Valdoria and the challenges facing the kingdom. Alexander spoke knowledgeably about economic issues, revealing that he had been studying modern economic theory and working with advisors to understand how other European nations were adapting to changing global markets. Helena contributed insights from her charitable work, describing how economic hardship was affecting families throughout the kingdom. They addressed criticism that the monarchy was an expensive anachronism in modern times. Alexander presented detailed information about the economic benefits of royal tourism and the diplomatic advantages of maintaining traditional institutions. However, he also acknowledged that the royal family needed to demonstrate their value through active service rather than simply existing as symbols. Helena spoke about her desire to use her position to advocate for those who had no voice in government. She had been quietly meeting with women's groups and social workers to understand the challenges facing ordinary citizens, knowledge she hoped to use to influence policy discussions behind the scenes. The interview revealed the couple's sophisticated understanding of their roles and responsibilities. They were not simply figureheads going through ceremonial motions, but thoughtful individuals genuinely committed to serving their country. Their willingness to be vulnerable and honest about their struggles made them appear more human and relatable than any previous generation of Valdorian royalty. As Margaret began to wrap up the formal interview, she asked what message they wanted to send to the people of Valdoria. Alexander and Helena looked at each other before Helena answered, speaking directly to the camera with quiet conviction. She promised that they would continue working to earn the trust and respect of their subjects every day, not through birthright, but through dedication and service. Alexander concluded by thanking the people of Valdoria for their patience and support during the difficult recent months. He acknowledged that being royal did not make them perfect, but promised that they would learn from their mistakes and continue growing as both individuals and as servants of the kingdom. The cameras stopped rolling, but the impact of what had just been recorded was immediately apparent to everyone in the room. The royal couple had shared more personal information in one afternoon than the monarchy had revealed in decades. Whether this openness would strengthen or damage their position remained to be seen, but there was no doubt that the relationship between the Valdorian royal family and their subject had been fundamentally changed forever. The hours following the interview felt surreal to both Alexander and Helena. They had lunch together in their private dining room, but conversation was sparse as they both processed what they had just accomplished. The weight of their revelations hung in the air between them, creating a mixture of relief and apprehension about how the public would respond. James Morrison, their press secretary, had been fielding phone calls from international media outlets since word leaked that the Valdorian royal couple had given their first major television interview. News organizations from across Europe were requesting advance copies or summaries of the interview content, sensing that something significant had occurred within the usually secretive royal household. Helena spent the afternoon walking through the palace gardens, her mind churning with questions about whether they had made the right decision. She had always been a private person, even before becoming a princess, and the vulnerability she had displayed on camera felt both liberating and terrifying. The gardeners noticed her unusual restlessness as she moved from the rose garden to the herb garden to the fountain courtyard, never settling in one place for long. Alexander had retreated to his study, where he attempted to focus on correspondence from government ministers, but found himself constantly distracted by thoughts of the interview. He had been trained since childhood to maintain royal dignity and discretion, and part of him wondered if he had betrayed fundamental principles of monarchy by speaking so openly about personal struggles. King Frederick had been traveling in the northern provinces when the interview was recorded, but palace staff had immediately contacted his security detail to inform him of the situation. The king's reaction would be crucial in determining how the rest of the royal family and the palace establishment would respond to Alexander and Helena's unprecedented decision to go public with their private lives. By evening, advance clips from the interview had been released to several news programs, generating immediate public reaction. The palace switchboard was overwhelmed with calls from citizens wanting to express their opinions, both positive and negative, about the royal couple's revelations. Street interviews conducted by news crews showed a divided public response, with some praising their honesty while others criticized them for abandoning royal tradition and dignity. Helena joined Alexander in his study after dinner, finding him staring out the window at the city lights of the capital. She could see the tension in his shoulders and the uncertainty in his expression. They had made this decision together, but both were beginning to understand the magnitude of what they had set in motion. Margaret Thornfield called that evening to inform them that preliminary audience research suggested the interview would draw the largest television audience in Valdorian history. The anticipation was building throughout the kingdom, with newspapers running front-page stories about what the royal couple might reveal. The interview had become a cultural event that transcended typical royal coverage. Sleep came difficultly for both of them that night. Helena found herself replaying every answer she had given, wondering if she had said too much or not enough. Alexander lay awake, thinking about his father's potential reaction and the long-term consequences of their decision to break with royal tradition so dramatically. The next morning brought a deluge of newspaper coverage speculating about the interview's content. Headlines ranged from supportive to sensational, with some publications praising the couple's courage, while others criticized them for cheapening the monarchy through public confessions. European royal correspondents were already comparing their decision to similar moves by other royal families, most of which had generated mixed results. Helena received a phone call from her mother, Lady Margaret Ashworth, who had watched the advance clips on the morning news programs. Her mother expressed both pride in Helena's articulate presentation and concern about the potential backlash from traditionalist elements within Valdorian society. The conversation reminded Helena that their decision would affect not only their own lives, but also their extended families. Alexander met with his private secretary to review the day's schedule, which had been adjusted to account for the increased media attention surrounding the interview broadcast. Several official events had been modified to include additional security measures, and the palace staff had been briefed on how to handle the expected surge in public and media interest. The afternoon brought an unexpected visitor to the palace. Lady Catherine Worthington requested a private meeting with Helena, a request that surprised everyone given her central role in the recent rumors. Helena agreed to see her, curious about what Catherine might want to discuss in light of the interview revelations. Catherine arrived at the palace looking genuinely distressed about her unwitting role in the controversy surrounding the royal marriage. She had been horrified to learn that her innocent lunches with Alexander had been interpreted as evidence of a romantic relationship, and she wanted to personally apologize to Helena for any pain the situation had caused. The meeting between the two women lasted for over an hour and proved to be healing for both of them. Catherine explained that she had considered Alexander a brother-like figure since childhood and had never harbored romantic feelings toward him. She had been devastated when the press coverage began, feeling responsible for the damage to his marriage despite having done nothing inappropriate. Helena found herself genuinely liking Catherine, appreciating her sincerity and her obvious concern for both Alexander and their marriage. By the end of their conversation, Helena had invited Catherine to remain friends with both of them, recognizing that the fault lay with media speculation rather than with Catherine's actions or intentions. When Alexander learned about this meeting, he felt a profound sense of gratitude toward both women. Helena's grace in handling the situation and Catherine's courage in facing it directly demonstrated the kind of character that made him proud to be associated with both of them. The resolution of this personal conflict gave him additional confidence that they had made the right decision in addressing the rumors publicly. Evening arrived with mounting excitement throughout Valdoria. Television viewing parties were being organized in homes, pubs, and community centers across the kingdom. The interview had become a shared cultural experience that was bringing people together to witness what many sensed would be a historic moment for the monarchy. Alexander and Helena had decided to watch the broadcast together in their private sitting room, away from the formal viewing that would be taking place elsewhere in the palace. They wanted to experience their own revelations as the public would see them, without the commentary and analysis of palace staff or advisors. As the hour approached, both felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. They had spoken their truth, shared their vulnerabilities, and opened themselves to judgment from their subjects in ways no previous generation of Valdorian royals had ever attempted. The success or failure of this gamble would become apparent as the broadcast unfolded and public reaction developed. The palace staff had prepared for various contingencies, depending on how the interview was received. Plans existed for damage control if the reaction was overwhelmingly negative, as well as strategies for capitalizing on positive response to strengthen the monarchy's connection with the people. James Morrison had assembled a team to monitor public reaction in real time as the interview aired. Helena took Alexander's hand as they settled on their sofa to watch themselves on television. Whatever happened next, they had been honest with their people and with each other. They had chosen transparency over tradition, authenticity over image management, and trust in their subjects over the protective distance that had traditionally defined royal relationships. The television screen flickered to life with the opening credits of the special broadcast. Across the kingdom, millions of Valdorians prepared to see their future king and queen in a completely new light, while Alexander and Helena prepared to face the consequences of their decision to revolutionize the relationship between the monarchy and the people they served. The broadcast was about to begin, and with it, a new chapter in the history of the Valdorian royal family would unfold before the eyes of a nation that was eager to understand the real people behind the crowns they would someday wear. The morning after the broadcast brought a transformed landscape for Alexander and Helena. Newspaper headlines across Europe proclaimed the interview either a triumph of modern monarchy or a catastrophic break with royal tradition, depending on each publication's perspective. The Valdorian press was similarly divided, with conservative papers criticizing the couple's departure from royal protocol, while progressive publications praised their courage and authenticity. Helena woke to find that her private secretary had compiled a stack of international newspaper clippings that would take hours to read completely. The coverage ranged from detailed analysis of every statement they had made to speculation about how other royal families might respond to such unprecedented openness. Several European magazines were already planning special issues devoted entirely to the interview and its implications for modern monarchy. Alexander received an early morning call from his private secretary, informing him that King Frederick was returning to the palace immediately and had requested a private family meeting for that afternoon. The tone of this message was carefully neutral, giving no indication of the king's reaction to his son and daughter-in-law's decision to speak so openly about their private lives and their vision for the future of the monarchy. The palace staff was experiencing a completely unprecedented situation as well. Hundreds of letters and telegrams from citizens were arriving hourly, expressing opinions about the interview that ranged from enthusiastic support to harsh criticism. The palace had never received such a volume of direct communication from the public about royal family matters, and additional staff had to be brought in to handle the correspondence. International television networks were requesting permission to broadcast the full interview with subtitles in multiple languages, recognizing that Alexander and Helena's revelations had created news that transcended Valdorian borders. Several American television programs were planning special segments about European royal family modernization efforts, using the Valdorian interview as a case study. Helena spent the morning visiting the Children's Hospital where she regularly volunteered, an activity that now carried new significance in light of her public discussion of charitable work. The hospital staff and patients had watched the interview, and many expressed appreciation for her authentic commitment to their cause. Several nurses mentioned that Helena's discussion of seeking help for personal problems had encouraged them to be more open about their own struggles. The economic implications of the interview were already becoming apparent as well. The Valdorian stock market had opened higher than expected, with analysts suggesting that the royal couple's demonstration of stability and forward-thinking leadership had increased investor confidence in the kingdom's future. Tourism officials were reporting increased inquiries about visiting Valdoria from international travelers who had seen news coverage of the interview. Alexander met with government ministers throughout the morning, finding that his public discussion of economic issues had generated significant interest among political leaders who had previously viewed him as merely a ceremonial figure awaiting his inheritance. Several ministers expressed surprise at the depth of his knowledge about policy matters and his genuine commitment to contributing meaningfully to national leadership. The international diplomatic community was also reassessing their understanding of Valdorian royal family dynamics. Embassy officials from several countries had sent preliminary reports to their governments suggesting that Alexander and Helena represented a more engaged and modernized approach to monarchy that might make Valdoria a more valuable ally and trading partner. By midday, preliminary audience figures confirmed that the interview had indeed drawn the largest television audience in Valdorian history, with over 80% of households tuning in to watch at least part of the broadcast. This level of engagement suggested that the royal couple had successfully captured public attention, though the long-term impact on public opinion remained to be determined. Helena received phone calls throughout the day from friends and family members who had watched the interview. Her childhood friends expressed admiration for her poise and honesty, while family members offered both support and gentle concern about the potential consequences of such openness. Her mother called to report that she had received numerous compliments about Helena's performance from neighbors and acquaintances. The afternoon meeting with King Frederick proved to be less confrontational than Alexander had anticipated. The king had carefully reviewed news coverage and public reaction before returning to the palace, and he acknowledged that his son and daughter-in-law had succeeded in generating positive engagement with the monarchy despite breaking with traditional protocol. However, he also expressed concerns about the long-term implications of such transparency and the precedent it might establish for future royal communications. King Frederick's primary concern was ensuring that Alexander and Helena were prepared for the increased scrutiny and expectations that would inevitably follow their decision to open their private lives to public examination. He warned them that every aspect of their behavior would now be analyzed more closely than ever before, and that they would need to maintain the standards they had established through their honest revelations. The evening brought analysis programs on multiple television channels, featuring interviews with historians, political scientists, and royal correspondents who offered varying perspectives on the interview's significance. Most agreed that Alexander and Helena had fundamentally changed the relationship between the Valdorian royal family and their subjects, though opinions differed on whether this change would ultimately strengthen or weaken the institution of monarchy. Helena and Alexander spent the evening reviewing the massive amount of feedback they had received from citizens. The letters and calls revealed a complex range of reactions, with many people expressing appreciation for their honesty, while others worried about the erosion of royal mystery and dignity. Several letters came from other couples who thanked them for discussing marriage counseling openly, crediting their example with inspiring these writers to seek help for their own relationships. International royal correspondents were already comparing the Valdorian interview to similar efforts by other European royal families, with most concluding that Alexander and Helena had gone further toward complete transparency than any previous royal couple. This comparison generated both praise for their courage and criticism for potentially damaging the broader institution of European monarchy. The interview had also generated unexpected interest from academic researchers studying modern monarchy and democratic institutions. Several universities announced plans for conferences and research projects examining the implications of royal transparency for constitutional monarchy systems throughout Europe. Alexander and Helena found themselves unwitting subjects of scholarly analysis that would continue for years to come. As the day concluded, both Alexander and Helena felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief. They had weathered the immediate aftermath of their unprecedented decision and found that while reactions were mixed, the overall response was more positive than they had dared to hope. More importantly, they felt that they had been true to themselves and their values, establishing a foundation of authenticity that would guide their future roles as monarchs. The long-term consequences of their decision would unfold over months and years to come, but In the immediate aftermath, they had succeeded in opening a genuine dialogue between the royal family and the people of Valdoria. They had demonstrated that monarchy could adapt and evolve while maintaining its essential purpose of service to the nation. Their marriage, tested by rumors and strengthened by honest communication, had become a symbol of resilience that inspired other couples throughout the kingdom. Their commitment to charitable work and progressive leadership had established them as more than symbolic figures, positioning them as active contributors to Valdorian society. The interview had marked a turning point not only for Alexander and Helena personally, but for the entire concept of royal duty in a modern world. They had proven that authenticity and vulnerability could coexist with royal dignity, and that trust between monarchs and subjects could be built through honest communication rather than maintained through mysterious distance. As they prepared for sleep on this historic day, Alexander and Helena knew that they had irrevocably changed their lives and their future reign. They had chosen to lead with transparency and courage, trusting that their subjects would value honesty over perfection and partnership over authority. The success of this gamble would be measured not in immediate reactions, but in the strength of the relationship they had begun to build with the people they would someday serve as their king and queen.